Good timing.
What is it? Another lizard?
That's no lizard. It's a dinosaur.
Dinosaur?